sure there will be. I'll start over with Senator LeVay.
Good afternoon. Senator Liu, I want to thank you for keeping the homelessness issue in front of all of us. I think that it is an embarrassment to all of us that we have not done more. I would first and foremost like to thank all the brave homeless people who are here today. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your stories. We do need to decriminalize homelessness. The people that I have spoken to, we do a good bit of work with the homeless population in SD 20. I have not spoken with one person who has said they are on the street by choice. I have not spoken with one person who says they enjoy sleeping on the street or in a park. I think we need to do more in the way of jobs. Most of the people that I know who are currently homeless are homeless because we had a great downturn in the economy, as many of you may remember, a few years ago, and that put a lot of people out on the streets. I have wondered many times myself, how many paychecks am I and my family away from being on the streets? We don't know. We don't know, and those of us who have a place to go to sleep each night are very lucky. We also need to do more in the way of affordable housing. Many years ago, and even now, we've been told that 25% of your income should be what you spend on housing. I think for most people that is now 40 and 50% at the minimum. And the woman here, I think she said it was almost her entire what she received each month. So that's part of that's on us to find better ways to make sure there's affordable housing and to make sure that there are jobs that are out there for everyone. As far as the comment about service resistant, I don't know. I haven't met anyone who is service resistant, but that maybe just is an SD 20. Maybe our people aren't feeling that way. But I just think we can do more. My concern, Senator Liu, we talked about is the $1,000 penalty. I hope maybe we can work on an amendment there because we do need to decriminalize homelessness, but I also want to make sure we're not penalizing our small businesses. So let's work together and let's do even more to make sure our homeless population goes away. Thank you.
Okay, Senator McGuire, Senator Witowski, Senator Cannella. Okay. McGuire. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Can you help me out with the cost? The opponents have argued that it's going to cost more to maintain the parks, to clean up the streets. Page 5 of the analysis talks about the U.S. jurisdictions incarcerating people at $87 versus a shelter at $28. Can you shine a little bit more light on that? What's the balances, the offsets?
I mean, I think that one important thing to note is that status quo, it costs a lot. All of the costs that you just mentioned of jailing, policing, the court system, hearing all of these cases, and then second, this is not changing homelessness. People are going in and out of the criminal justice system, but they are still in the parks and on Skid Row, and that's the status quo. And so all of those costs already exist, and because this ticketing and harassing and arresting is not taking people out of homelessness, but actually keeping them homeless, right? The tickets and warrants, as you heard, are keeping them on the street. We don't anticipate that this bill will change the number of people who are homeless, except that we hope that there will be fewer barriers for people to get into housing.
So
all those costs exist already.
The district attorney's office, who's just spending money prosecuting this, would redirect their resources to other more serious criminal activity, I guess.
That's right. I mean, it's not a one-for-one, right? You're not taking money out of this pot, and we recognize it's not the same pot of money that cities are spending. We do want to point out that we understand cities are under great duress, and you heard from the business partners and the city colleagues. Homelessness is a crisis. We all know this. If you've lived in a time when you didn't see people sleeping on the streets, you know that we are in trouble. We have a crisis, and we understand the cities and the businesses are just as concerned as we are, and we'll take their sincerity to heart with that. But that's the status quo. You know, what we heard about the parks and the costs and what's happening in Skid Row, that's the status quo in cities that criminalize homelessness and resting and sharing of food. And in fact, the researcher who presented with Me Too earlier has done research of 10 camp cities, and what he found after interviewing police and city and people who went to live at a camp city, why they were there, it's because the police had to enforce criminalization of sleeping. And they said, you can't sleep here, but if you go over there, I won't bother you. And so that's how the tent cities build up over time, is because people aren't allowed to sleep, rest, share food on a sidewalk, and instead they're sent to a tent city. And he has an academically published research document showing that. So the point is that we understand these dollars are not tit for tat, but we believe that the cost pressures over time will help a conversation flourish on how to appropriately, respectfully, and successfully respond to homelessness.
Senator McGuire.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and do want to say thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing this to move forward here today, and thank all of you for being here and your personal testimony. I also want to say thank you to Senator Liu. Her support for homeless services, particularly focus on women and children and seniors, is to be commended. She really has been a champion for affordable housing, so Senator Liu, thank you so much. And also to the work of the Western Center on Law and Poverty as well. Thank you so much for your tenacious advocacy, and you are tireless, so thank you. And I really do believe that the conversation that this legislation has started across the state on poverty and on homelessness is one of the most important that we can all have. And I think that many of us, at least in the room, can agree that we are facing a crisis related to the lack of investment for programs and services for homelessness, mental health services, and the absolute lack of funding for affordable housing. It's embarrassing. And I agree with one of the gentlemen that spoke. I think the real solution is going to be all of us working together at the table, state, cities, and counties, and investing in permanent supportive housing. I would like to just speak to a unique perspective from the North Coast of Northern California, where I'm grateful to work. And I'd just like to be able to start with Eureka, which has in Arcata, and it's really good to see the councilman here. Eureka is a town of 27,000, and it sees a significant number of individuals coming through the community due to the marijuana crop. 60% of all marijuana in this nation are grown in 3 counties, Mendocino, Humboldt, and Trinity. And I know that sounds odd in the conversation that we're talking about today, but the reason I say that is because they see a vast number of individuals coming through, particularly during harvest season in that city. According to Eureka's police chief, Andy Mills, there are about 600 permanent homeless in Eureka, another 1,200 that are semi-permanent. And then during harvest season, that swells to a few thousand in a town of 27,000. And literally, people by the thousands from across the nation come into Eureka and Arcata and Weaverville and Crescent City and Ukiah and Garberville and are there for several months. And it's also a different population than what we traditionally see from throughout the state. And I'm going to give you an example. Just over the last 45 days in Eureka, 12 guns have been confiscated from individuals around the street. And again, this is not a wide blanket. This is very unique to the North Coast. And it's unique because of the marijuana crop that is robust and blossoming in Northern California. So I say all this in the context of this bill, that I do have concern, and relayed that to Jessica as well as the senator, that it's very challenging for me to be able to support it here today. I understand that there may be some willingness to be able to work on this, which I support. But I think the bottom line for me is we need to reinvest in affordable housing and reinvest in redevelopment. And shelters, focus on programming and services and infrastructure. Again, Senator Liu has been a champion. I do not want my words of concern on this bill to reflect the amazing work that she has done in the Assembly and the Senate. It's this specific piece of legislation that I have deep concerns with, particularly for Northern California and the North Coast, Mr. Chair, and at least in the current moment, would be a challenge to be able to support today and hope that we can continue the conversation. And again, really appreciate all the work. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Senator Cannella, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Liu, just have 3 questions. The first is the right to rest in public spaces. The first question is there a time limit on that? Is it unlimited time to rest in public? Because I think of resting as sitting down, cooling off, getting a drink of water, not long-term camping. So is there a time limit set on the resting?
There's not, excuse me, there's not a time limit on this.
So it's undefined. So it could be
Undefined.
a lengthy
Yes.
time. Okay.
Well, and just to clarify, it's whatever is equal to other folks. So if in a place there's a park closure law, and no one can be in the park after 10 o'clock, then no one can be in the park after 10 o'clock. And the question is just, if you have someone who's in a place for longer, you don't want homeless people to be discriminated against. And so any law that exists would be applied equally.
Thank you. Typically, non-homeless people would not be camping on the sidewalk, though. So that's really hard to enforce and define. So thank you. Secondly, on the fine, so it says, the bill provides that a person whose rights are violated pursuant to this act may enforce these rights in a civil action, and then it goes and talks about a statutory damage of $1,000. Those are different, right? Statutory damage is a fine. A civil action could be much larger than that, correct? It could be, it goes to court ultimately, right?
So the maximum penalty would be $1,000.
So that through a civil action?
In a
So they'd
civil
have to do a
action.
civil action, and it's capped at $1,000? So it would not exceed $1,000. What if one attorney got 100 clients? Could it be 100 times 1,000?
It's $1,000 for the civil suit. And I think the important thing here, disproportionate impact has been raised a lot. And this is not, this is creating special rights for homeless people that will be enforced by civil.
Just in interest of time, my question is it 100 times 1,000? So could it be much larger than that? That's just a very narrow question.
Yeah.
So it could be. Thank you very much. And then lastly, just the clarification of public space. The bill defines public space as property owned in whole or in part by a state or local government entity or any property. Any property, I guess, would be private property as well, upon which there is an easement for public use and that is held open to the public. So can you give me some examples of any property that's under an easement? I'm an engineer, and so I think of easements as something that's recorded. So can you explain to me other property that would have an easement that may fall under this act?
I think the thing to think of is like a plaza in a mall, an open space that everyone's using. The dad waiting for his teenager, me with my kids get to sit for the same amount of time as a homeless person who is in that plaza. Again,
So I have a business and it has a parking lot that's open to the public. Would that parking lot fall under this act as well? Because anybody could park there.
right, so homeless people can also park there.
But if it's private property, no.
Property is excluded.
Yeah, so it was the intent of the author, and we are as co-sponsors in support of the intent to absolutely exclude from the conversation private property, and we've mentioned that to the opposition and welcomed the conversation. We've also talked about an amendment to clarify. We're talking really only about public space that's open to the public when it's open to the public, and we've been, just readily available for these conversations. Unfortunately, they haven't. Our requests for those invitations have not been responded to by the opposition.
So we'll strike any property then from the language, right? It would just say
It's a clarification.
state or local government.
It's public property. Yes, limited to.
Thank you, Senator.
Public only. Senator Galgiani and Senator Gaines and Senator Roth, please.
I want to thank the author and everyone. There is a problem in some places in the state where the tool is being misused by law enforcement, and it's been being used in a heavy-handed way, and that needs to be addressed. That behavior needs to be addressed. We aren't seeing that problem in my district, fortunately, and I believe in my district we've worked really hard to make sure that we provide services, and certainly we always need to be doing more, and we've seen a rise in the homeless problem in my district as well because of the economy and because of the loss of jobs for folks. But in my district, to take away the tool for law enforcement would be absolutely detrimental because we have a different problem that's unique in my area. And I want to preface what I'm about to talk about by saying that in no way do I mean to tie homelessness with crime. Not at all, not at all. But herein lies the problem. you or I or law enforcement, we cannot tell who's homeless, who belongs to a gang. If I dress down, I can blend in as well. You cannot tell by looking at someone whether they're homeless or whether they're engaged in other activity. Law enforcement can't tell either, and that's why they need these tools at some times. My district, as I said, is much different. This last month, we had a drive-by shooting at a market just blocks away from where I used to live a few years ago, where 3 people were killed. Now, it's a known place where people loiter. How do you define loiter? You can't define it by looking at someone or just seeing that somebody's spending too much time in a place for too long. That's why we have to rely on law enforcement to make judgments about the behavior that's taking place. And then law enforcement needs that tool to be able to address the behavior, not the amount of time somebody is spending somewhere or what they look like or what their resident status is, but the behavior. And you know, this happened, and 2 weeks later, we had 2 motorcycle gangs at a strip joint, and a third one shows up, and gunfire is exchanged, and bystanders are hit. This is the problem in my district. Law enforcement in my district, they're not bothering people who are homeless. But again, I respect that it is occurring in some places in the state. But we shouldn't take away a tool that is used correctly in some communities and do a broad a blanket for everyone to abide by. If the behavior, if the tool is being misused by law enforcement and if they're being heavy-handed about it, then we need to address that behavior and not take away the tool. And so I won't be able to support this bill today.
Senator Gaines, please. Senator Roth, please.
I want to thank Senator Liu for bringing this bill forward. I agree with you, homelessness is a problem, and I think we spend too much money in terms of public safety in really addressing it in the wrong way. And so I would like to see if maybe there's an opportunity to take a look at a different solution, because I think your legislation doesn't solve the problem. So it takes away the criminality issue, but we still have homeless individuals that need services. Okay, so we have people that are mentally ill. We need to make sure they're getting services. They need housing, and that's been complicated with a very tough recession. And when we take a look at funding, I think there's huge challenges on the funding issue, because how do you take public safety money and then reallocate that for housing and serving the homeless? But we ought to be, I think, examining that, and I think you're attempting to do that with this legislation. But I still don't feel like it's solving the issue. And when I take a look at the Sacramento, the downtown Sacramento partnership, they've got their bid, and they have provided some help. So they said that they've been able to serve about 500 people in the downtown Sacramento area. They've been able to get 117 of those individuals housed, which that's positive. These are things that we ought to try to be encouraging, but at the same time not discriminating against homelessness. So where are the tools, where are the opportunities for those solutions? I come from Placer County. We have an organization called the Gathering Inn that is a lot of people support financially to address the homeless issue in Placer County. Now, I know that differs from community to community throughout the state. So I would like to support an ultimate solution, but I don't feel that this legislation does it. I thank you for bringing it forward, but I can't support it. So.
Thank you. Senator Roth and Senator Bates. Senator Roth?
You know, I did a little informal survey of the cities in the 31st Senate District. It's not totally complete. I was sort of curious when I was listening to and concerned, frankly, when I was listening to the presenters talk about being arrested essentially simply for being homeless, and that's quite bothersome to me. It's my understanding that the cities, thank goodness, in the 31st Senate District do not do that. but rather focus on the activity being engaged in. Now, that's what I'm told, but perhaps there's another story and a deeper story. I guess we'll see how this bill ultimately turns out. I'm old, so I remember a little bit of history from Southern California, inland Southern California, and I know the League testified about cities and concerns. I'm not sure that this is altogether about affordable housing as I consider affordable housing, and I think it's probably more about the incentivizing and the development of homeless shelters and transitional and supportive services. And I've seemed to recall in inland Southern California, cities being so disinterested in the homeless issue that they pushed homeless to other cities that had established homeless shelters and transitional and supportive services. And frankly, they were in the area that I currently represent, and that conduct was, and to the extent it continues to exist, embarrassing. So I'm wondering as we go through this process if it would not be worth our while to figure out, certainly with the League's help, since they obviously have some opinions on the subject, to figure out how to incentivize cities, all cities, to properly establish homeless shelters and transitional and supportive services, and not figure out a way to hide them in areas where nobody can find them, so that the homeless are left to fend for themselves. So, Mr. Chair, I'll take a look at this when it's finalized. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Bates.
It off. Actually just said what I was going to say, Senator Lee, that I think the incentivization for local governments to address the problem is critical. Having served at local government for about 19 years, and I can't speak to the entire Senate 36th district, but I can speak about Orange County, because we did incentivize through a 10-year plan to end homelessness. We did get community support for setting aside at the county $3.2 million to develop a year-round homeless shelter. There has been resistance in the cities because of the attendant resource issues that they would have to provide, and that's where the incentives can come for locating these sites. We actually had 2 sites selected, but because of the other issue, and it goes to what Senator Galgiani was saying, there's a concern about law enforcement, and is it going to be present, and is it going to be able to use the tools to address the criminal element that hides among the homeless. They become victimized also by this element that wanders among them and dresses like them, but is there to basically victimize them in the communities in which there are large encampments. The city of Laguna Beach had a very, very difficult problem. They actually created a homeless center where you can go for overnight shelter. The county then directed all of our resources to that encampment so that they would receive the resources and had law enforcement there. So to me, it's 2 issues. Certainly what the senator said about don't take away the tools that law enforcement needs. Ensure that they are using it properly. And that can be done, again, through direct contact with our cities and counties. But the state has to take an active role, because we were out there in the county of Orange doing it on our own. We did not feel the connection from the state. In fact, you all know, on another issue, the county of Orange lost $150 million. A lot of that money on the vehicle license fee issue was going to this very issue. So we need to look at it in a more holistic fashion. I was a social worker. I know the plight. I have great compassion and sorrow when I had to deal with people, but this is not the solution. It actually, I think, exacerbates the problem, because it now opens the door and communities will see this happening in their communities if anybody can sleep on the street overnight. So I think it needs more work, but I want to work with you because I would like to see before my term ends that we really have addressed the problem and we have ended homelessness.
Thank you very much.
I wanted to get back to the, Senator Allen, you want to make some comments? Go ahead, please.
I really apologize for missing much of this. I was chairing the elections committee hearing, but
We all do that.
I wanted to weigh in. First of all, to say that it's clear that we have a crisis on our hands, and it's clear that there's an enormous funding problem. I do think I have to take issue with a couple of things that I saw in the League of California Cities letter to Senator Lieu, one of which basically tried to, there's a line here that says that social service programs are funded and operated by federal, state, and county government, not cities, and talks about how cities just don't have the resources to dedicate to affordable housing, and that they really only work on police, fire, water, refuse collection, public works, parks and rec, and libraries. Now, I just think that that's not the experience in my own district. I have a number of very progressive cities that are working really hard, not only on law enforcement, libraries, parks, public works, et cetera, but also really robustly on issues of homelessness and social services. So let me talk about my own hometown, the city of Santa Monica. And my staff and I have been engaged in extensive conversations with Santa Monica officials and their representatives and several other progressive cities in my district. And as the city notes that while some Santa Monica residents lose their housing and become homeless, homeless individuals also migrate there for a variety of different reasons. It tends to be safer than downtown LA, and tourist spots allow for panhandling, and it's a beach community that has access to public restrooms and showers, and we also have a lot of really strong social service infrastructure in place. But we in Santa Monica have a really robust action plan to address homelessness that deals with identification of the most acute and vulnerable homeless individuals, prioritizing the most intensive interventions and supportive housing resources to address their needs. There's a focus on a housing first approach, where individuals are provided appropriate housing as quickly as possible with intensive wraparound services to stabilize them once housed. All of this funded by the city, by the way. This is not, this is a city who stepped up to take on a leadership role in this area. There's collaboration with the criminal justice system, including the implementation of a homeless community court, which is a partnership between the city of Santa Monica, the LA County Superior Court, and the Public Defender's Office and service providers, which promotes participation in treatment for reduced or eliminated sanctions. And since its inception in 2007, this court has graduated 105 program graduates who moved into permanent housing. And very importantly, there's serious local investment. The city, this one city, provides over $7.2 million annually in human services grant program funding to local nonprofit agencies to create a safety net of services, and over $2.6 million of this funding is specific to programs dedicated to homeless households. So, this is not enough. We haven't solved the problem, but I think at least in the case of the city of Santa Monica, there's a real serious attempt to try. And when folks in my city who care deeply about homeless prevention tell me that they think that this bill is a step in the wrong direction, it's just something that I can't ignore. And so that's why, I'm not ready to support this bill today either, though I'm really serious about having a dialogue. And I actually spoke with Jessica yesterday about this to see how we can get people on the same page and really talk about this in connection to some of the broader homeless social services needs that we all know are out there. I'm an attorney. I care a great deal about civil rights and civil justice concerns, and I just want to say that I hope that that folks don't take my inability to vote for this today as any indication of my lack of interest in pursuing a set of policies that will help to bolster the attempts of cities like my home city to really help transition people out of homelessness and into supportive wraparound services, et cetera. So that's just my thought. I really am interested in working closely with you and trying to solve some of these fundamental issues. I just don't think the bill with this current wording is there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a comment. I wanted to state that the federal government today announced that they were proposing guidelines to make the Medi-Cal and S-CHIP, the program for healthcare for kids, conform to the Mental Health Substance Abuse Parity Act, and that's been 10 years coming, and we're very happy about that. We think that having good mental health and substance abuse treatment, which causes a lot of people to fall through the social service safety net fall down below the social service safety net, land on the streets, and then have our police forces have to pick up the issue of dealing with the homeless in a way that is wasteful, inhumane, just not what we want to represent as the type of services that we want to have for people in our society. That's not what we want. So we want to develop a system of housing and healthcare that catches people before they fall into the situation of homelessness. So we're on our way. We're doing a lot of things to do that. We need to recognize, however, that there are people that are arrested and put into the criminal justice system inappropriately. And I know that, having visited 19 jails and prisons, including the Los Angeles Twin Towers. I toured that facility and saw was about 2,000 people in the mental health part of the Los Angeles County Jail, people that generally were chained to tables inside the jail. I always thought, why are we in this kind of business of government to somehow pick the worst and the most expensive way of treating and caring for people? So we have a chance this year, I think, in a comprehensive way, with the housing proposals that are now on the table, to deal with this issue of providing housing first, which is clearly the answer. Clearly the answer is to provide housing first and put people in a stable environment to help begin treatment of the needs that they have. And the most cost-effective way, if I was a real conservative, fiscal conservative like my colleague Senator Gaines, who I've known for years, and he's a very conservative person, if I had to look at the most fiscally conservative way of treating somebody, I would go to Utah and find out what they did in Utah with their Housing First program, and got almost every single person that was homeless off the streets in Utah. And they didn't put them in jail. They didn't put them in, we're spending $60 grand a year on putting somebody in a state prison. The jails are about the same. If they're homeless, it gets up to $100 grand a year. So, we can't continue to spend money like that. So Senator Lieu, you're right. We have to do something to kind of break through that. That's not the way we do business right now is wrong. We can't do that, because what we're going to do is we're into bankrupting the state government. That's what's going to happen. We're going to end up bankrupting the state government, having these people circulate in and out and all through these crisis hospitals, prisons, but not actually deal with the issue. So I think we need to still work on this. I hear a willingness of our colleagues on both sides of the aisle to continue to work on the bill, and I wanted to know what your thoughts are at this point are, Senator.
First of all, I really want to thank you and the members of the committee for the time that you have given to this very difficult subject. And you've seen some of the people that have been affected by this particular situation, and like every citizen of this state, we should not have folks in this condition. I do want to tell you that, the solutions to homelessness is not an overnight. It's going to take time and lots of resources. But there is, we need to be mindful not to criminalize homelessness. But I'm willing to not take a vote and continue, hopefully with you, and maybe we could have a hearing on this, a more serious conversation about a plan to how we can direct the state resources into moving this issue off of the agenda and to a solution for everybody's satisfaction. So I do appreciate everybody's concern about this. It is a nutty problem, and I look forward to continuing our work together to try to resolve this homeless issue.
Thank you, Senator. So members were, the senator's asking that she
Not take a vote.
not take a vote today, and we'll agendize it at a future meeting with discussion in between, okay? Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you, Senator.
And by the way, Senator Allen, I'm sorry. I've been here all the time for re-election, so I missed the committee.
Okay, if everybody who is interested in this item could leave the room, and then we could start the hearing on item number 2. Senator Hill is here. Senator Hill, as soon as we can get everything organized here, we would like to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
To present. You have item 2, SB 34, and then the second one, Senator Hill, is SB 438, correct? So, Senator, we'll begin with SB 34, correct?
Would you like me to proceed, Mr. Chair?
Just a second. We'll let the people leave in a few minutes.